Hello everyone, my name is Chad Connor. I'm the new Emergency Management Agency Director as appointed by Governor Ivey. And I just want to start out by thanking Governor Ivey for this opportunity to be the new Director of Emergency Management Agency, for our state of Alabama. And just to get started, I want to go over a few things with everyone in here today. I'm not going to take up too much of your time. I just want to hit on some ideas, some plans I have for this department and, moving forward. I want to start out, just give you a little background information of myself. Over the past 15 years, I've served as fire chief in 2 departments here in the state of Alabama. I've been in the fire service for 25 years. I spent much of my career in Saraland Fire Department. And also I was born and raised in Saraland, so I was lucky enough to serve there for a long time. It's a little different when you serve in the community where you grew up. You know a lot of people in the community. You make runs on people, so it's it's a little more special. At times it could be more difficult too, making runs on people and I'm also currently enrolled at Columbia Southern University, pursuing a master's degree in fire executive leadership and emergency management services. So on a personal note, I'm married to my wife, Heather. We've been married for 18 years. We have 2 children, Brady 16 and Reagan 14. So, just to give you a little background of where I am in my life, just so we can get to know each other a little better. So, I know this picture of this coach here gets a lot of attention in this room. Being in the state of Alabama, you probably either love him or you hate him. So, let's just think for a minute though, whatever team you like, Alabama, Auburn, let's put that aside for a minute and just think of the stuff he done as a leader for a football program here in the state of Alabama. So, one of the quotes he's had, it's one of my favorite quotes that he's ever said, is mediocre people don't like high achievers and high achievers don't like mediocre people. So think about that in your departments, your fire departments, your police departments, your emergency medical services, wherever you work, do your higher achievers, how do they feel about the mediocre people who do enough just to get by? And vice versa, the ones who do enough just to get by, how do they think of your high achievers, It's just a good quote, when you're trying to build a team, like Coach Saban always said, trust the process, and it worked for him, not just in football, but I feel like that works in a lot of us, we put it towards our life and our careers. We want to be the high achievers, we want to do the best we can do, especially in the fields we're in. The people we serve deserve the best. So like I say, just kind of think of that as a team building, think about your department, the type of team you're looking to build, and, the kind of department you want to be. So moving forward, what is emergency management? So by definition, emergency management is the organized effort to prepare for, respond to, recover from, and mitigate the impacts of emergencies and disasters. It involves coordination among government agencies, nonprofits, private sector, and the public to protect lives, property, and the environment. So basically everybody in this room is an emergency manager of some aspect. You work for fire departments, you work for police departments, you work for ambulance services. We have some private sector people in here, and we'll touch on that later about how we want to build relationships with people in the private sector, if we need their help during an emergency. So they kind of break it down, 4 different categories here. We got the mitigation, preparedness, response, and recovery. So they kind of go in order, and I'm going to hit on each of them just a little bit. Mitigation is actions to reduce long-term risk of hazards. So mitigation is stuff we can do well in advance of an emergency to minimize our damages. Some examples for that is, levees to prevent flooding, enforce building codes. In our area, the whole state, building codes reflect a lot about hurricane. How can they stand up to a hurricane? whether it be storm surge or wind speeds, and you know, our building codes need to reflect that. They may have to stand up to a higher wind speed than, say, you know, other parts of the country, just because we're vulnerable to hurricanes being on our coast, you know. Preparedness. You know, preparedness includes planning, training, exercises to ensure effective response when a disaster strikes. So examples of this is emergency drills, people and departments stockpiling supplies, you know, to be able to provide the first responders with what they need so they can keep going, you know, after the disaster. And developing evacuation plans, which we do a really good job here in the state of Alabama with evacuation plans. You know, from the coast up north, you know, we turn I-65 as northbound only. You know, we use both, which is normally north and southbound lanes. We turn them into both northbound lanes to be able to evacuate people from the coast in the event of a major storm. Our response, what you guys do every day. This is the immediate actions taken during and shortly after an emergency to save lives and prevent further damage. So, you know, emergency responses is what most people in this room handle every day. And recovery, exactly what it says. You know, recovery is the activities to restore communities to normal or better conditions after disaster. Some examples of this is rebuilding infrastructure, providing financial aid, and providing mental health support. You know, our first responders may need some mental health support after some of these emergencies they respond to. And rebuilding the infrastructure and stuff like that, that's, you know, it's going to be on us to rely on some of these private sector guys to help with that after an emergency. So, you know, the bottom line is emergency management is there to create a safer, more resilient community, be prepared to withstand and recover from emergency or disaster. So we want to be as prepared as we can, and we want to be able to respond as best we can, and we want to be able to recover as quick as we can to get everybody back to normal. So I want to hit on some plans for the future for us to be successful, and I say us because this is a team event. You know, it's going to take everybody in this room, people from agencies all throughout the state, to make this work. So I just want to hit on a few things that we have, you know, to be successful for the future, some things I would like to see done. So one thing is, you know, we want to do a comprehensive hazard assessment. We want to know what and who in our state is vulnerable. You know, of course, we have the coast, you know, dealing with hurricanes, we know that. But, you know, in the past, we've had some of these hurricanes, you know, they come further inland, you know, and we may have hurricane conditions, you know, as far north as Birmingham and, you know, even further north. So, you know, we want to be prepared for stuff like that. Flooding, you know, we got a lot of weather events that happen here. You know, just this past year, you know, we had the snow. Snow's something we don't normally get. You know, we had 4 inches of snow all the way down on the coast, and that's just something that doesn't happen very often here. And we, you know, we want to be prepared for that and see if we're vulnerable there. We want to review and update the emergency operations plan. And this is for everybody in the state. You know, we want everybody to be on the same page, so we need to know that, you know, you're up to date with the plan and if there's any changes that need to be made. We want to do a public awareness campaign. You know, we want to make the public aware of, you know, what we plan to do in the event of a disaster. You know, we want them involved. We want feedback from them. We want to do multi-agency training tabletop exercise. So what this means is, you know, let's just take the South region, for instance, since I'm more familiar with it. You know, we may have Mobile and Baldwin County, our 2 counties that touch the Gulf of America. You know, we may want them to do some tabletop exercises together, like if we have a major storm coming up in the middle of Mobile Bay, which is right between the 2 counties, you know, what is Mobile County and what is Baldwin County going to do? What can they do to work together? You know, what can this county do to help this county? You know, in areas throughout the state, you know, if your counties are close together, we want you to work together. And we don't want the first time you work together to be in the emergency. We want you to do some exercises prior to be prepared. You know, we're going to continue to apply for federal and state grant funding. You know, grants are a great source of income. You know, it kind of alleviates some of the pressure on the taxpayers to have to fund a lot of this stuff. So we want to get all we can from the federal government. We want to invest in early warning systems. Of course, again, with hurricanes, we're pretty set on that. We know it's coming. We may have weeks, to prepare for that. But other weather events that happen in our state, like tornadoes, we don't have as much time to get prepared for something like that. So we want to see what we can do there, to increase the amount of time you have to prepare for a weather event such as that. We want to upgrade our emergency operations center. This is all throughout the state. Some of the county centers and all, might be getting old and aged and need upgrade, not only in the building itself, but in the computer and the IT departments. We want to make sure they have everything they need that's up to date. We want to increase public drills, tornado drills, active shooter, hazmat, hurricane, stuff like that. Some we practice all the time. Some we probably need to practice a little more often. And I hate to say it, active shooter drills in these high schools and middle schools throughout the state. We probably need to start doing that more because, throughout the country that's becoming more and more prevalent. We want to have formalized mutual aid agreements. Again, I go back to, counties in your area, in your region, we want you to work together. We want you to have agreements in place to where when these emergencies happen, it's seamless. You just work together like you work together every day. We want to do full-scale exercises and involve all community partners. That's where some of our private sector people come in, and we want some of these exercises to include them. Like, what do they have to offer that we may need? Let's build those relationships with them and see what we can do. We want to perform a comprehensive after-action review of progress made over time. So one of the big things for me is I want feedback from you guys and girls and departments, and let me know how we're doing. If you see something we're lacking in, let us know. If you see something we need to, put more money towards, put more effort towards, let us know. I'm big on feedback because, we're here to serve you. We're here to help your department, to help the citizens of Alabama. So, don't be afraid to give me feedback, both positive and negative, because that's what's going to build a better emergency management agency is, the feedback from you on how we're doing. So I want to hit on the fire department's role in emergency management. So, when something bad happens, the communities, a lot of times the first place they go is fire and police. That's who they're looking for help. So the fire department is a cornerstone of the local emergency response and trusted community presence. Everybody in all the communities, they always trust the fire department. They bring operational expertise, leadership, and boots on the ground capability. So the boots on the ground capability is the big thing here. They have guys that train for this stuff all the time. And they're crucial in every phase of the disaster. Again, I go back to the phases like the mitigation. The goal there is reduce hazards before they cause harm. So what can the fire department do? Well, they go out and do building inspections, code enforcement, and they educate the public on fire prevention risk and risk reduction. Educating the public is a big part of this. We want them to know what they need to do in the event of a disaster, so they're better prepared. We want fire departments to advocate for fire-resistant building materials. That's kind of tough for a lot of people, I know, like the sprinklers in the residential homes and stuff like that. We want to advocate for stuff like that. The response, protect life, property. You do that now. You do it every day. It might be on a larger scale after a disaster, but it's the same stuff we do now, protect life and property. Contributions from the fire department they go on and on. It's just, they have the people that are trained in different areas. They're trained in medical, they're trained in fire, they're trained in hazmat, they're trained in search and rescue. They have a lot of specialty teams, these fire departments throughout the state, so we want to utilize them where we need to. In the different things, the incident command, most fire departments and most police departments in our state now, they utilize incident command, and we're all on the same page there. So that's gonna make that part of it easy. Teamwork, I've spoken on teamwork already 2 or 3 times, together everyone achieves more as a team. So not only within the state, the different government agencies, we want to be a team. We all want to be striving for the common goal. Teamwork with government agencies is essential in emergency management because no single agency can handle all aspects of the disaster. Collaboration across local and state, federal levels ensure efficient use of resources, clear communication, and a unified response. So, your department may not be able to handle everything that comes up, during a disaster, whether it be tornadoes, hurricanes, let's say we got a large scale hazmat spill, your resources are going to be exhausted real quick. So you may need to reach out to that neighboring agency for help. And this also includes, building that teamwork with private sectors. What do they have to offer? Do they have some heavy equipment we could use during a hazmat cleanup or during a hurricane cleanup or tornado cleanup? We want them to be a part of the team also, and we want those relationships built before the disaster happens. It is just, it makes the response more seamless, and go a lot easier. Something else we want to do, I've got some pictures here back from my local fire department. We want to take care of these guys. These are the responders. These are the boots on the ground that I referred to earlier. These are the guys and girls that are going to get out and help you during a disaster. So we want to take care of them. And when I say take care of them, we want to ensure they receive the necessary training. We want to make sure they receive the equipment to perform at a high level. And whether that's, the state, the federal government, getting some grants to get some more training and some equipment, that's avenues we can look into to get this stuff done. We want to make sure they got the emotional support they need. I know that's not a popular topic among, people to talk about, but these people, these responders see a lot of stuff day in and day out, and we want to make sure their mental health, they're able to deal with these things, these issues they see, these, the bad things they see. So we want to offer them the emotional support they need, if they need it. We want to take care of the ones who take care of us. If we don't take care of these responders, when the emergency happens and they don't show up, we're going to wonder, well, where's the fire department? Where's the police department? Where's the ambulance? So, we want to make sure they're taken care of. And with that, I'm gonna close. Like I said, I wasn't gonna take much of your time. I want to thank you for your attention. I look forward to working with everyone in this room. Again, I want to thank Governor Ivey for the appointment, and I'm just ready to get to work. And again, thank you all for having me.